Guys, I guess we back with another video from Cross Connect. So Cross Connect is your channel to share information between two communities across the pond being the Atlantic Ocean. We have on one side the French community with France, Switzerland, Belgium, and also a beautiful, continent of Africa. Even though in Africa, the both languages are spoken, French and English, and they will be able to tap into whatever content. And then North America, where we have Canada, US, and also Mexico. But unless we have specific content to talk about Mexico, we'll do. But for the most part, we'll be focusing more on Canada and US. Okay. So we're back with a content that is not really the most pleasing one, but it will be about racism. Okay. So now, racism. All right, can you share my screen? Now you can see my screen. Racism was in a common value throughout human history. Okay, so I know this is not the most pleasant, but racism at its has its delineated aspects, such as discrimination, separation from the rest of the society, and it has been a significant aspect of the past history and the modern times, and I've been justified, and I've been used actually to justify some of the most horrific events in past and recent history. Okay, therefore, we want to appreciate what it is, where it's coming from, where does it originate, what is the rationale behind it, what is the prevalent reason throughout history. What about ancient civilization? Can we say that Greece and ancient Rome were racist civilization? Yes or no? If yes, we'll explain how and why. And did they foresee a similar kind of discrimination that what we see today, discriminating people because of their skin color or origins? And or can we see racism emerge more recently, and what were the reasons or the reason for racism emergence? Now, I'm aware this is a multi faceted topic. It will create certain level of emotions on both sides. You have people that were directly touched by slavery, my African American brothers, but also all the people like me that are originated from Africa, even though my father was French and white. People feeling about racism and discrimination in a different way. Those who are descendants from slaves and others. But at the same time, there are some other people on the other side that have directly benefited from it, or have lived alongside it, didn't touch it, but some people, some part of the society have benefited from it. So we also need to understand the impact in different sides of on the different sides of this situation. Now, despite this emotional backdrop, the evolution of racism, discrimination, even eugenics often leads up to envision parallel lines, but in reality, they are not parallel. They are, at some point, these lines are actually intersecting, and they're intersecting at a given point. And that would be interesting to discuss about. Okay, and I'm sure you imagine what it is. Now, we will have 5 topic that we will discuss about. What about racism and discrimination in ancient civilization, Greece, Rome, and Arabic civilization? 2, social Darwinism and Code Noir, usage for the French colonial system. So I'll explain what it means in terms of the Darwin studies, and also the creation of the Code Noir and what it meant. Okay. 3, the evolution towards scientific racism and the racial theories in modern times. This will be quite fascinating as well. Eugenics and its impact in the 20th century. And you will see, things. I will not get into deeper details, but there were horrible things that were done at that time. And I'll take an example. What is the French colonial legacy, the racism and discrimination, and its long-term effects on the society? And then we'll finish with a conclusion. Okay. So now we need to take in consideration that throughout time, different philosophical movements have demonstrated some level of, misogyny and even racism. Aristotle, an important figure in Western philosophy, shared views about women being inferior to men both physically and intellectually. Confucianism is a philosophy that profoundly influenced East Asian, countries and civilization, and have core principles: humanness, righteousness, social etiquette, wisdom, and knowledge, trustworthiness. However, differently to Aristotle, they recommended that women should be submissive and restricted to domestic duties. Does it make it racism? Not at all. It's actually a principle that were ingrained into the ancient society. These societies don't exist anymore, but they have progressed where we are today with some level of equality between men and women. Okay. So now if we look into more recent philosophical movements, we can say that social Darwinism provides a loose ideology that was inherently employed to project the notion that societies and races were in a state of survival, resulting in a perception that certain races were more well equipped than others, which led to eugenics. And you will see that, during the conversation we'll have about this. I'd like to reiterate something, that the objective of this video and discussion is not to assign blame to any individuals or race, not at all, but rather to emphasize the significant negative consequences racism had on our human society, and the challenge it presents today for us to coexist in harmony and to find a way to create more greater good for the benefit of the human brotherhood. Okay. I would like to remind all of us that there's a path forward. We simply need to walk it. Okay. Not so long ago, there was a man, a great man, who had a dream, and he was also close to another great man that was assassinated in 1963. And I'm adamant about this dream, and I believe that that human society is unquestionably a family. And not less than that, we are a family. We all share something together that is a beautiful planet. And diversity is rich for a reason. So let's enjoy it. So I'll see you in part one, which will be about the prejudice and discrimination in ancient civilization. See you in part one. Thanks. Guys, I guess we're ready for part number one. So part number one, to recap, it's so part number one, what about racism and discrimination in ancient civilizations? Was this something existing in ancient Rome and ancient Greece? And we'll touch slightly about the old Arabic civilization to explain some certain views about this. Okay. In antiquity, it was frequently assumed that racism was not a prevalent perspective that individuals held regarding themselves and others. The prevalent perspective was, that the ancient Greeks and ancient Romans were only distinguishing lines between civilization and barbarism. Okay, defining the ethnic and cultural distinctions between the two cultures. There was no racial prejudice. Okay, but the systematic analysis of both, racism and stereotype provided by Benjamin Isaac with his conception of racism in classical antiquity reveal that some of these elements can be described as proto-racism. Okay, so what is proto-racism? Proto-racism is viewed as this earlier version of racism, served as an inspiration for the early modern authors. Okay, subsequently developed the more well-known racist concept that we all know today. So the quest for proto-racism in ancient human civilizations such as Rome, Athens, or eventually, we can imagine other civilizations of that time, was frequently motivated by cultural, ethnic, and religious distinctions. Okay? It is evident that it is significantly distinct or separated from modern racism, which is defined by the belief in the inherent inferiority of specific races and the use of pseudo scientific justification to bolster that view. Okay. Therefore, can we say that it is possible to assert that racism was prevalent in ancient human civilization in the same way as it is today? Well, the ancient Greeks and Romans, in fact, distinguished themselves as civilized and others as barbarians. Okay, they were not advanced civilization in the same way as they saw themselves. However, the short answer is what is not entirely clear. Okay, the concept of race at that time was significantly different. It was primarily founded on cultural, political, and social distinctions rather than biological ones. You see what I mean? Because now we are using traits like, skin color, origins, physical traits, and characteristics. Okay. Simultaneously, the distinction between civilized and barbarian societies was significantly blurred by cultural interactions. You had the intermarriages, you had the fluid boundaries between the two sides because conquered people were actually joining the civilization after. Like when Rome was, doing war for conquest. So basically, when they were conquering some terrains or some countries or some regions, basically what they were doing, they were inviting the high level of that society to join the civilization of Rome. Okay. So it's not uncommon for individuals from barbaric background to be granted citizenship as a result of their birth, culture, language, and also military service. So we can see examples in ancient Rome where you could see conquered people that joined the army and became general. Expanding that perspective to include enslavement, introducing an additional layer of complexity. Because if you think of it, there were numerous justifications for slavery, including debt, status of the conquered individuals, if they were part of the high society or part of the aristocracy of that society, then in that case, they were not being bounded to slavery. In spite of these factors, skin color was not a stumbling block to citizenship or enrichment. It means that if you were even different, if you were even a slave initially, you could become something like a real citizen and you could enrich yourself. Okay. However, there were other forms of discrimination and inequality, particularly in relation to women, who were generally afforded less opportunity than males. Okay. So if we think of it, it will be a little bit unjust or unfair to discuss ancient civilization without discussing about the Islamic empires or the Arabic empires and their expansion, as they were frequently identified as the significant component of slavery for ancient civilization, not only for Black individuals, for all individuals. In reality, the circumstances were actually quite identical. If you think of it, in comparison to Greeks and Romans, the Islamic and Arabic civilization were exceedingly sophisticated. They were exhibiting a profound level of refinement in the fields of science, astronomy, poetry, and the arts. Okay, painting and sculpting. Although it is impossible to discard the fact that slavery was a significant aspect of the society, the same as the Romans and the Greeks. Okay, so it was based on the same principle as for the Greeks and the Romans: debt, war and conquest, crime, and the plethora of trade between trans-Saharan and Indian Ocean networks. So they were having some places where they could trade, and where they could trade, they could buy, people that could be prisoners on the other side, is sold as slaves to Arabic people. Okay. Now again, the answer is a resounding yes. So you had yes, discrimination. You had a different level of different ways to treat people depending where they're coming from. But there was not pseudo justifications or predicated elements based on biological conditions that were triggering that vision of discrimination or inequality. It is important to acknowledge as well that the Islamic law stipulated the rights and protection of captives, and the slaves were not targeting based on their skin color. Rather than they were actually Europeans, they were Africans, they were even Asians. Okay, so similar to ancient civilization, they were, slaves were gradually integrated into society. They could eventually, when they were taking Islam as their religion, they could marrying free individuals and achieving freedom and prosperity, meaning enrichment. Okay. So the purpose of this segment specifically, it's not to emphasize the origins of the racism disease, but much more to establish that proto-racism and modern racism share a common denominator: the dehumanization of the other. If you feel yourself stronger or in a position of strength, then in that case you are using it. That's what it means. But on the other side, it is the biological and inferiority justification that will result in disaster, regardless of this denominator, which is a significant distinction between proto-racism and modern racism. That modern racism was using, pseudo-scientific justification for racism and discrimination. So naturally, and indeed, proto-racism serves as a foundation for contemporary racism. But in consideration of the ancient roots of modern racism, the qualification for racism will naturally evolve towards the rise of scientific racism, okay, which will be inevitably leading to eugenics and state-sanctioned discrimination, like the Nazi regime and the French collaboration. Okay. These discrimination may be openly manifested in South Africa for apartheid, or declared as false, as in the United States prior to the civil rights movement, and as in France, since the pseudo end of the colonial era. Okay, so now in France, they're claiming that there's no discrimination. There's plenty of discrimination in France right now. Can we say the same in US? I'm not living in US to specifically argue about this, but discrimination was effectively and discrimination and separation between black and white was effectively in effect in US prior to the civil rights movement.